Anybody that knows me knows that Wonder Woman is one of my absolute favorite comic book characters. So to hear that Wonder Woman was finally going to be brought to the big screen left me excited, but also really nervous. Very nervous. What with all the quality of films that DC has been put out in the last couple of years, I've been scared that they would not handle this movie right. And I'm also nervous because other forms of DC has not impressed me with their interpretations of the character. So I was nervous, a little scared. But Patty Jenkins' Wonder Woman came out, and here are my thoughts.
Step back. Or maybe not.
Wonder Woman stars Gal Gadot, Chris Pine, Robin Wright, among many other actors, and is directed by Patty Jenkins. I'm going to first talk about my positives about the film, then we'll go into the negatives, and then I'll talk about my overall impressions. So without further ado, let's get started with the positives. My first positive, let's talk about the writing. The writing is fantastic in this movie. The writers seem to have a really good understanding of who the character of Wonder Woman is. This is a film that, unlike some of the previous DC films, has really properly developed this character. They threw problems at her. Real problems. Some real conflicts. She has to make decisions. And she has to learn from her mistakes. And she has to grow as the film progresses. And that's something this film does absolutely right with its writing and directing. I'll get into that a little bit later. My next positive is its use of characters. I thought going into this film that Chris Pine and Gal Gadot were really going to be the only two I cared about. But it was more than that. The other characters were so well utilized. Most particularly, their group of people. The people that are shown in the photograph in Batman vs. Superman. I did not expect at all that I would care about these characters. They were given backstories. They were given, like I said, with Wonder Woman, problems. They had to overcome character flaws. They had to grow with the movie just like the other characters in smaller arcs, but they made me care about them. They made me care about their relationship with Diana and their relationship with Steve Trevor. They did such a wonderful job introducing these characters and utilizing them perfectly. I was a big fan of how these characters were acted and how they were utilized. My next positive is the love story between Diana and Steve Trevor. In a lot of comic book movies, I feel like I actually really dislike when they throw romances in these films for no particular reason, with no weight, no development time, just for the sake of happening. One example for me is in Doctor Strange. I didn't feel like Rachel McAdams' character did much to further the plot. Felt like it was just a love interest just to have a love interest. But this film, unlike more than any film in a long time, really sold me. Like, it made me ship those two hard. Like, more than I had ever anticipated. They did such a wonderful job selling me on the relationship, giving them scenes together where they're just talking and relating and connecting. A big part of that is obviously not just the writing, but the performances by Chris Pine and Gal Gadot, and that's where I'm going next. Patty Jenkins does a very excellent job of emphasizing on Gal Gadot's strengths and trying to stay away a little bit from Gal Gadot's weaknesses. And that's not a slight at Gal Gadot. There's a couple scenes I will say, where she really has to express a lot of emotion, and it comes a little bit flat, but those are pretty, not often, and it's a little bit of a nitpick because they're not too bad. They're just not excellent. But what Gal Gadot does really well in this film is subtlety and nuance. She does small really, really well, which is very difficult. When she can become vulnerable and play naive and innocent, but not dumb. She doesn't play dumb. She plays naive. That's just very important distinction. The way she's able to handle this and balance this in her performance really works. Her physical performance she's Wonder Woman. She has the composure. She has that fierce nature underneath it all, underneath the innocence. She does such a wonderful job of her physical acting to portray this character. It was right out of the comic book. I was in awe. Chris Pine, he was fantastic. Great job. Comedically, he brought the comedy to the film in so many ways. The way he worked off of the other characters, in particular Gal Gadot, was fantastic. He brought just so much to the role. You can tell he really cared about this. He was not phoning this in. He truly cared about this, and he brought a lot to the table. And this film was spectacular thanks to a lot of the work from Chris Pine. The action sequences in this film is my next positive because they are incredible. This movie, in a lot of ways, it does such a great job of making Wonder Woman so much fun to look at in this when she's fighting. I kind of get a little frustrated with some films for its use of slow motion, but I feel like this film utilized it pretty perfectly. The action sequences are fun, they're engaging. You're uptight, it doesn't cut away too much. You get to watch the action. Everything is happening in front of your eyes. It is a classic case of very good superhero, superhuman comic book action that worked really well on screen. It was really fun to watch and was incredibly well executed, particularly the first two acts. One last thing I'm going to throw in as a positive, I just want to mention there's a scene in the second act that almost brought me to tears. It wasn't like a sad moment. It was just, you'll know it when you're watching it. It's just amazing. One of my favorite sequences in the entire year so far. It is wonderful to look at. It's beautifully, it looks beautiful. The character motivations for the scene is amazing, spectacular. The lead up to the scene, incredible. So look out for that. You'll know what I'm talking about when you see the movie. I honestly could go on and on and on with positives, but I'm going to make my way over to some of the negatives, which there's not a lot. Some of these are nitpicks, but there are some negatives. So let's get started. It's really been kind of the elephant in the room to this point because, as you've heard, I've talked very positively about the first two acts. The third act is, in a lot of ways, it's the weakest part of the film. It's going to be very tricky for me to talk about it without spoiling, but I'm going to do my very best. There is a certain element that's added in the third act of this film that I don't particularly agree with at all. In fact, I think in a lot of ways, this element almost in a lot of ways detracts from the overall film in general. I think it would have made the point this film was trying to make, a lot of what this film was trying to say just in general, and a lot of the major themes, if this one particular element from the third act had been just entirely cut out, I think the film altogether would have been more impactful, and it would have been tighter, and it would have been just altogether better. There's it's hard for me to go into obviously without spoilers, but there's just an element in the third act that I was not much a fan of. The CG for the most part is it's usually pretty good. There's a few scenes where you dip out, particularly in the third act, where it starts to look kind of cartoonish a bit. Not to a degree where it really pulls me out of the movie. Like I remember thinking like that's CG, that's CG, that's CG, that's CG. I mean, clearly it's gonna be CG. It's a superhero movie, but like it for whatever reason felt a little bit more rushed than some of the stuff earlier in the film where they were using CG and it flowed a little nicer. That's a little more of a nitpick. It's not something that's really going to detract from my grade of the film, but it's just something to note. Guys, Wonder Woman is, in my opinion, the best film from DC since The Dark Knight. This movie is really good. And in my opinion, this is going to go down as probably a top 10 comic book movie. I would say it's likely top. It's almost certainly top 10. I want to sit on it a little bit, but it's probably sitting in that top 10 comic book movies for me. And if I could just make some tweaks to that third act, if they could just cut some things that I felt were unnecessary and detracted from the plot out of that third act, made it feel less of a comic book movie towards that end, this movie I think could be an argument for one of the greatest comic book movies to ever be made. So this is that close to being one of the best comic book movies in my opinion. But guys, I highly recommend you see it. Wonder Woman, I am giving a 9 out of 10. Guys, I'm really pleased to say that I really love this movie, and I think you guys will certainly love it as well. I'm probably going to have repeat viewings. I plan on probably seeing it a few more times in theaters, which I'm really excited about. This gives me a lot of hope for the future of DC. I'm very excited to see what comes next. So thank you very much for watching, guys. This is Ryan from RAZZLE. Make sure you leave a like if you liked the video. Make sure you comment your opinions on the movie. I want to see what your opinions are. We'll start a discussion. And follow me on Twitter at Ryan_Havens. And stay tuned for some more content. We got a lot of stuff coming your way, guys. Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one.